Salutations, Shades, and welcome back to your one-stop shop for all things strange and unusual, talking with shadows. The conversation everyone has, but no one wants to admit to. Here with your host, Vic Whately.
And Marcus D. And joining us in the studio today, we have author and Evansville native T. Harriman.
Yay, that's me!
Yeah. At age 15, she started as a reporter for the Evansville Press, then the Evansville Courier. She now works as a young adult novelist where her books pull a lot of elements from the paranormal, and her book, Burn This Book, The 10,000-Year Plan, was just nominated for a Pulitzer. Welcome to the studio, T. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much. I'm kind of hoping that we can mention Jake Paul and Kim Kardashian here, so you can put their heads on the on the thumbnail for clickbait.
I like that as a way to get clickbait to bring people into the
Yes.
episode.
Please do.
What's going on? What's going on? I'm a hermit. I don't know what's happening.
These are cultural icons, you plebe.
For better or for worse,
Yes.
yeah.
I
Some
don't
would say
know.
for
I
worse.
live in my basement and do research.
No, seriously, no lie. The only pop icon that Vic knows is Kesha. That's it.
I know
Oh,
Kesha
that's
is.
not
That's
bad,
it.
though.
The
Kesha
only
music.
one. That's
That's
it.
not bad. I mean, if you gotta know one.
Boom,
you know-
right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not bad.
No, he knows Neil Patrick Harris and
I know
Kesha.
him.
That's it.
Well, that's
it.
good.
That's,
the only
that's
two.
pretty much
Yeah,
Gordon
he-
Ramsay. I know Gordon Ramsay.
He's an icon for sure.
Thank you so much for coming into the studio. Actually, in
Thanks for
honor
having me.
of you coming into the studio and you telling us this is your first time on a podcast, we decided to bring out the good alcohol.
Aw.
And today we're drinking Recorder Lig, which is like the best hard cider that is out there.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely love this stuff. When we started getting this in Evansville, I almost lost it.
Oh, man. So, cheers to you.
Oh,
T.
thank you very much.
Thank
to
you.
you as well. To the new year.
Into the new year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is our first video of the new
Yeah,
year.
no, it's
Oh, this
no,
is
it's not.
delicious.
Oh, it's not?
Technically, the birds aren't real conspiracy was the first
That's right. We got up late. That's right.
episode.
Oh,
I would have rathered your episode be the
Oh,
TV
no,
than-
you're fine.
than,
It's still the
than
new
us
year.
talking about the birds are a real conspiracy.
Okay, guys, the birds are real. Just everyone realize the birds are real.
So, yeah, no.
Oh,
So,
this sounds ominous.
yeah, so we apologize. We apologize.
That sounds ominous.
Yeah, thank you for coming in today. You had initially reached out to us. You
Yes.
you found us and reached out to us, which is the first time that we've had a guest do that.
Oh, yes. Well, I do a lot of research for my books. I try to, obviously, my books are paranormal, fantasy, sci-fi, but you try to make them as realistic as possible. So I try to do research on the paranormal. For example, my upcoming book has an actual Sumerian curse in it. I try to make them realistic so that I don't get the opposite of fan letters with people saying, Madam, are you aware that? So I try to avoid that.
Okay, I got to ask a question on Ellie's behalf since she's not in the studio with us
Yeah,
today.
no worries.
Ellie really loves paranormal young adult books, but she likes hers to be a little racy. By any chance, are your books a little racy, maybe a little hot and bothered?
Well, now, my next book, All Hail, she said, setting down the delicious side. This is delicious. It really
very
is.
I told you.
Yeah, it's really good. My next book, which is coming out in March, All Hail the Queen of the Freaks. There
That's
is
an awesome name.
That is a great name for a book.
Thanks. There's lots of raciness in that.
But good. I will let her know to keep an eye out for that one.
Oh,
She loves
thank
that sort of
you.
stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I cut my teeth writing romance books. And that's what I first published and so I wanted to write something that my kids could read. So this book does have a romance in it. Burn This Book, The 10,000 Year Plan. It does have a romance in it, but I kept it pretty clean because I needed to make, I needed for it to be palatable to critics and whatnot. But to answer your earlier question, so I do research on paranormal stuff to make sure it's as realistic or as real as I know it to be. So I found you guys, and and I'm listening to you guys while I'm doing a spell check, and I'm like, man, they deal with stuff no one else,
Thank you.
We
deals
are weirdos.
with. And I'm telling you, and listen, I comb Reddit, 4chan. I mean, I'm everywhere, and you guys, have detail and stuff that nobody else deals with. And so I'll never, and so I remember all of a sudden you said Dogtown, and I thought, oh, there's probably Dogtown, something else. But then I think you said Evansville, Indiana, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys are in my hometown.
Wait.
And that's when I had to contact you.
So so your first experience with us was listening to our Dogtown videos? I'm sorry.
Yeah, they were not great.
That's back in the dark age, like when we had a lot lower production value than what we have now.
No. Hey, I mean, I assure you, I spend my whole day on the internet, and there's nobody that deals with the supernatural in the detail you guys do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. We
Yeah.
appreciate that. I wish more authors.
true, though.
Well, and it's interesting. I wish that there were more authors that, because you were talking about that you pull a lot of real paranormal things, like stories for your books as a theme,
Right.
and elements in them. And I wish that more authors would do that, because there are so many real paranormal stories that are out there for people to be able to pull from,
Right.
that are really rich in lore, and I think would be really awesome for them to look into.
Well, I don't want to hit kids over the head, and and the last thing I want to do is proselytize, because that's not who I am. I don't want to preach to anybody, but at the same time, I don't want to hide it from young people, because if you hide the supernatural from people, or you don't talk about it, you tend to think of it as being separated and severed from us, and that's a good way to get taken advantage of by the supernatural. It's a good way to and you don't develop yourself fully if you cut yourself off from that part of your nature.
I love that response. But getting into like some of the stuff that you delve into, you mentioned earlier that you took inspiration from a real life Sumerian curse.
Yeah.
And I want to know which one?
Which one?
Which one? Well, oh gosh. Now this is where it gets going to get embarrassing for me, because I lived around Chicago for about 26 years, and I belonged to a museum on the campus of the University of Chicago called the Oriental Institute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really embarrassing. I'm a museum geek, and the Oriental Institute, for example, in one of the Indiana Jones books, it places him in the Oriental Institute, going around the galleries and doing research.
How is that embarrassing? That sounds
That's just
cool
cool.
as hell.
Oh, the Oriental Institute is like this amazing treasure, worthy of Indiana Jones, and it's like all about ancient civilizations. And so I went to a talk one night, and it was Halloween themed, and it was on, and the professor was talking about Sumerian curses, and some of them are beautiful. Well, now this if this doesn't sound strange, but I mean, translated and in structure, they are they're beautiful. But there's also blessings too. I mean, and so, I include those in my upcoming book. It's going to be out in March. So, the All Hail Queen of the Freaks.
Cool.
I'm gonna get a copy of this book
yeah.
for sure. That sounds. I mean, see, you keep saying that sounds embarrassing, but that sounds so cool. I mean, I think that
The Oriental Institute is just like this. Like anybody who is into Indiana Jones or like secrets and treasures, it's like, oh my gosh.
And you're among good company. Me and
Thanks.
Ellie have worked in the Pit Rivers and the Balliol for a summer. So like we're big museum geeks, and Well, Ellie was in, I think it was her work in the Balial. She was actually translating a old Ishtarian curse.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, she knows more about. I know a little bit. I picked up from her, but she's the one that knows way more about that than me.
Oh, okay. Well, part of the oh boy, you're not interested in this. So, but part of the book, I copy the structure of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh my god, I'm a huge Gilgamesh fan.
When he said Ishtar, I had to.
Oh,
I copied the structure.
You
You
know-
know, deep was the. Let's see, deep. What like in? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Gosh.
I don't want to brag because you guys talk about your work in museums, but I also hold a season pass to the Indianapolis Children's Museum. Just,
Ooh.
just
well
Just
played.
so-
Well played.
That's pretty
but-
sweet, though.
I
Well
just,
played, Marcus.
I
but-
love that.
you guys are talking about your museum memberships. I thought it would be.
We're dropping names. Maybe listeners in the comments could drop names at the museums they belong to.
That would be nice. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, what are your favorite? So you talk about from paranormal elements. What are some of your favorite types of things in the paranormal to try to pull from?
Oh gosh. Well, I really don't. I don't pull from the paranormal unless it suits the plot. Because as I said, my purpose is not to, is definitely the last thing I'd ever want to do is preach to people. So yeah. So I mean, I don't, so I'm sorry that doesn't really answer your question.
No. You're,
So it's just sort of like on an ad
fine.
hoc basis.
For whatever's this do. Well, I mean, I think that's cool. Well, I think that it's awesome that you have an open idea for whatever is going to fit, because we see it all the time in the paranormal community where people will they'll over specialize themselves into a particular type of field. Like they'll only look at one type of thing, like only look at ghosts, only do demons, only
Right.
look at cryptids.
But there's definitely this greater pattern out there that shows an interconnectivity between a lot of it.
Well, for example, I was just dealing with this scene yesterday. I was putting some finishing touches in it in the All Hail Queen of the Freaks book. There is one scene where these they're large dolls, they get possessed. And, my hero, she walks out of her room and she sees them at the end of the hall. They say, pick one of us. One of us is good. One of them is evil. She's like, you're not real. She tries to run her hands through them, and one of them bites her, and and so she's got to figure out. She's like, well, I got to get rid of them. So, so that's so that was just the plot. So I had to deal with that.
I like that. That's awesome. So one of the things that happens to a lot of people when they really start diving into the paranormal is, especially if you've not grown up with it, or you've not been exposed to it before, or
Right.
it's some of your initial time, or even long time, I would say veterans in the paranormal would experience this too. I mean, it can be draining. How do the characters in your book cope with facing the paranormal?
Well, I want to try to make it, with the characters in All Hail Queen of the Freaks. My hero, she just is basically just not a believer. And so she spends a lot of her time in denial at first. And then, as freaky things start to happen, she has to deal with them. Yeah.
Is there anything that you take inspiration from? Because I know you know a lot about the paranormal here in Evansville. Is there any local mythology you draw on?
I have a lot of stories that I have heard from my family as I was growing up. My family has been here since the 1830s, 1840s.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So like almost right after Evansville was founded.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So for the older people in my family, the West Side was basically kind of in the middle of what we would call downtown today. But I have a lot of stories, and I brought some of them.
There was no east side in Evansville for a very long it was literally just the west side. I mean, even when I was a kid, the east side was not very well developed.
Yeah,
So
but I brought some of my family stories.
That's so well. That was one of the things that you said that really, really made me want to bring you onto the podcast, because you were talking about how rich and paranormal lore that Evansville is. Me and Vic know that, and so many times people don't know that and they ignore that. And I mean, some of the very first videos that we did highlighted Evansville's paranormal history. So we would love to hear more and share with more people some of Evansville's stories. Yeah.
And I think we should. I mean, when I kind of mess around on Reddit and 4chan and do my research and listen to people talk, I hear people say, I'm never going back to the Midwest. It's the most haunted part of the country. And I believe that's absolutely true. It's in the name of our state, the crossroads of America.
Oh, yeah.
And we all know what happens at the crossroads. I'm not sure it's an accident that one of the biggest churches
People
our
don't know
city is Crossroads.
the kid that The Exorcist is inspired off of. That family is from the Midwest.
Oh, I didn't realize
It was
that.
from St. Louis.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Before they went to the coast, they were having problems.
Oh, yeah.
This is the Midwest is where that came from.
Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do believe, I remember telling you that I was convinced that the Big E has so much in common now, especially with the Big Easy. I mean, the paranormal, the supernatural, really tends to become evident whenever you have a transition point between places, right? And of course, the Crossroads America, obviously, we're a transition,
And talking about being the crossroads of America, Evansville right now is when they built 69,
Yeah.
and they have 64 and 69. We are now a straight 2-hour shot, straight driving from the crossroads of Louisville, St. Louis, Nashville, and Indy.
Right.
Exactly in the center.
And that's one of the reasons why we have, well, of course, and a straight shot from Chicago. I know this from, having 41 run through my old hometown. So that's one of the reasons why we have so much trouble with drug running, gun running.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Yay! Evansville is such a hub for these places,
They built 69
things.
and our murder rate tripled the following year.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it did. When 69 was complete, if you look at the stats, our murder rate tripled.
So you see, I don't think it's an accident that we have that we're here as a crossroads in so many different planes, and in the past few months, oh my God, a murder a day, and not just a murder a day, people being rolled up in rugs, young people, dying, horrible, tragic deaths. I mean, there's a baseline for reality. And when there's like a sharp departure from the baseline, that's when you have to start asking questions. And, but I think culturally too, we have a lot in common with New Orleans. And so, I do. I believe, and laugh at me at you want. Evansville's certainly not a large city, but I think of it as the New Orleans of the Midwest. Thriving arts and restaurant scene, all that.
New Orleans is one of my favorite cities to go visit. I'd love to talk more about the connections between New Orleans and Evansville, because I've never really thought about that before myself.
I know, 100%. I would totally agree. I would agree with that. Well, there's a huge Catholic influence.
Precisely.
Here in Evansville,
That was
New
one
Orleans.
of the things I was going to mention.
Yeah. So
Right.
there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of similarities that you probably could talk about.
Right. You and the Catholic Church absolutely does a lot of wonderful, wonderful work. But there's also a centralization of power to where people don't, you depend on one person to do all the spiritual work, and so people don't. They're a little bit more hands off with that, and in doing so, you open yourself up to not having control, not having as much power over your over the spirits around you in your personal life.
So that act of giving up the power and autonomy to someone else for your spiritual teaching,
Right.
then in turn
You said it
weakens you
so
to
much
defend
more
it.
eloquently than I did.
I'm just making sure I understand. I can be really
did.
dim sometimes. So
No,
I'll just
not
make
at
sure I'm
all.
understanding.
And I do not mean to cast aspersions on the Catholic Church, because, as I said, it has done a lot of really, really wonderful work. I grew up Catholic. My family is Catholic, and I do see all the wonderful, wonderful work they do, and the teaching and the community work. But I'm just saying, whenever you, for example, I remember when I was a little kid, my family would take us to St. Meinrad, and we would stand outside the office of the exorcist for the area. And I believe that's since been moved to Indianapolis.
Yeah, but it's still like one of the largest archabbeys in America.
Perhaps
Actually,
maybe
and even in the world too, it's one of the largest ones. People don't know about. It's pretty cool. It's about an
Oh,
hour.
it's-
It's about an hour drive here.
What
Yeah,
are we
people
talking
don't. It's
about?
gorgeous
St. Meinrad
and
Archabby.
so peaceful and beautiful.
Have you never been to St. Meinrad?
Oh,
Where
it's
is it?
gorgeous.
It's like northern Spencer County. It's the Archabby
And
up
the
there.
food.
I didn't know about
Mwah,
this.
chef's kiss.
Man, I
You
love
can't say
food.
it.
I'm going to check this place out.
Yeah,
I
you
love-
do. It's
I love
beautiful.
Catholic buildings
Beautiful,
and I love food, so this
And you
sounds
will-
like a trip.
Yeah, it is a profoundly peaceful place. It's beautiful. Well, I'm just saying that when you have the priest, although many priests don't believe in this anymore, but when you have one person, for example, who is in charge of doing all the exorcisms, then you don't think you can do that in your own personal life, whereas legally all of us have the authority and the power to do this. So
We have to have you back on at some point when we're interviewing Ricky Bruckman.
Yeah,
We
so
have to have you on at the same time as him.
talk about
everyone
legal
there.
issues and things like
No,
that.
exorcism and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Oh.
I would love for you to talk about some of the stories that you had growing up,
Yeah.
like some of your paranormal experiences that you had here in Evansville.
Yeah, we did. We kind of got away from that.
No, you're fine.
No worries.
No. I definitely wanted to highlight that because you were talking about that, and I think I would really love to know more about that.
Absolutely. What, as I said, I grew up super, super German, and these were people who believed in facts. Well, indeed, I have been educated to view reality. I have a reporter's training, a newspaper reporter's training. I was a professor for 12 years full time, so I believe in statistics. And so one of the things I learned was to consider the source. And so when these people with their tough German backgrounds, when they told you a ghost story, your ears perked up because you knew that they believed that they had witnessed something that they believed objectively to be true and real.
I 100% understand exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Because I've lived in Evansville since I was born in Evansville. So I 100% understand what you're talking about because they'll be like, we don't believe in any of that ghost mumbo jumbo.
Absolutely.
But let me tell you something. That would happen to me. And then they'll tell you like the creepiest ghost story that you've ever heard in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and in my own life, I did not really, I was pretty much the same camp until 2013. And even then, I had to examine what was happening to me through the eyes of statistics. What are the odds of this happening? What are the odds of that happening? And the odds they drop pretty quick until you realize, okay, yeah, statistically speaking, this X or Y has to be true.
At a certain point, a synchronicity becomes a pattern, and that pattern has to mean something.
Right, absolutely.
So what was your very first paranormal experience that you personally had? Or that you know of. Whichever one you'd like to talk about first.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me go to my probably my family's is probably the most interesting to the listeners because some of my stories deal with points that listeners can actually recognize. You know, I'll start off with the first one. One of my uncles had a rent house downtown near the Courier and Press building, and it had a dirt floor in the basement. And everything would always go wrong with this house. He was always calling in electricians, plumbers, you name it. And all these people would always tell him there's absolutely nothing wrong with the electrical system, the plumbing, etc. And he would be working in the house. Over time, he had to do work himself. Nobody would come work on the house, and he would feel like he was being watched. He heard his name being called lots of times when he knew it was alone. And he found occult paraphernalia, stuff written on the walls. But despite all this,
Are there any details on the occult paraphernalia? Because one of my favorite things to do is to break down occultic iconography. Did he pass on any details on what it was?
I remember him saying pentagrams.
Okay.
Yeah. But one day, you know, and he kept kind of blowing all this off like you do, you know, like trying to find a logical explanation. Until one day he had to dig up the basement. Now, why this is, I don't know. And he found 2 dead bodies there. And he was terribly shocked, but he covered them back up. And he never told anyone because he knew he'd never be able to sell the house.
As you do.
As you do. Well, you know.
Like, we're just going to cover that back up.
Yeah, you know, Martha Stewart, she's all about the right ways to cover up the bodies in the basement.
It's like it's got a dirt floor basement. It's been highly fertilized.
Just turned into a selling point.
You know, there might be some calcium deposits in there.
So to this day, I drive past that house and I wonder, do the owners know that they have some extra residents in the basement?
I have a curiosity for you.
Yeah.
Since there was occultic iconography and 2 bodies, what do you think happened to the bodies? Do you think they were ritually sacrificed? Do you think there was a greater occultic purpose here? Or do you think it was maybe something else?
I don't know. I really don't know. Because I was relatively young. When I was relatively young when I heard this. But I do know. Because my family owned a lot of rent houses back in the day. And I do know that... that if there were shady goings on back in the day, if somebody was murdered in a house or something happened, if you had that kind of basement, you would just put them in the basement. Nobody would know.
Well, Evansville, way back in the day, I mean, even in Indiana in general, used to be very, very rough. I mean, literally since its beginning, used to be a very, very rough. Like the term Hoosier, one of the possible backstories to that term was how rough Indiana used to be, that ears would get ripped off in bar fights because they were so violent here.
Right.
That people would go Hoosier like that because because of our accent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like people don't know that.
There's at Evansville, people don't know I'm older than you guys. People don't, a lot of people don't realize Evansville has like a huge organized crime background. I mean, I can't, on the air here, I can't name specific places, but I'm sure it sounds.
No. We know.
Okay, I was gonna say, yeah,
we have also not talked about some. I know Vic's had some run-ins in the past.
Yeah, I knew about like the rum running and stuff, and I've had a few personal issues, but I didn't know that there was like a large organized crime.
Where are the crossroads of America for the
drug running, gun
we're the number one
running.
methamphetamine.
We're talking about like meth running and stuff like that. Okay, never mind. I'm cut.
Center of the opioid epidemic here.
Like I said earlier, I can be a little dense sometimes.
No, you're good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
He's like, Evansville's such a safe place. I'm so glad I
live here. You know what? Honestly, and this is gonna sound terrible. I felt safer on the south side of Chicago.
Although I do think Evansville's
I live
a wonderful
7 miles. I used to live 7 miles south of Gary.
I mean, to be fair, in Evansville's defense, I don't know if you can really compare like the murder rates in Chicago to Evansville, but
per capita, I'm starting to wonder.
Yeah, well, no, well that's true. Now that's starting to be true. Now I will agree with you on that.
Yeah,
I will agree with that. Well, I'm telling you, Me and Vic were downtown Evansville, man, one time, and I swear we thought we saw like Santeria iconography.
It was Santeria iconography. I've also
Oh, I
found that,
believe
in
that.
a graveyard
oh,
I
yeah.
was investigating around Brazil, Indiana. It was a graveyard I had been to many, many times, and this time when I came back, a bunch of the gravestones were broken down, and there was a lot of graffiti in there. So I took pictures of the graffiti and I sent it to a professor friend of mine who's really big into iconography, and they're like, "This is Santerian."
I believe it.
Oh yeah.
I really do. But well, anyway, so that is one of my stories. Another story I would be really, really, and I wanted to bring it to you to hear if you had heard anything about it. And I'm really wondering, hoping that viewers have or listeners have. And if they have heard about this place in Evansville, I'm hoping they will say something in the comments. But my grandparents and my parents told me about a place on the west side called Devil's Hill. And it is a place where it looks like a road is going downhill. But if you put your car in neutral, your car would drift backward. And I remember driving that road a few times and my parents doing this for us a few times when I was a little girl. And it was like surrounded by cornfields. But I cannot, I cannot remember where it is today. So it would be amazing if a listener could tell us where Devil's Hill is down in the comments.
I think it used to be by rights.
Oh, okay. Well, then perhaps not cornfields.
I could be
Although
wrong,
back then-
but don't hold me to
Because
that. But don't hold me to that because I think
Okay.
most of the hills are down by there.
I was going
Like
to say,
most-
is it definitely in Evansville? Because I know there's one of those a bit north of us, but it's outside of the Evansville area, and there's one further
Like
south of us.
like up near Hopstad.
I remember.
Yeah.
I
Hopstad
seem to
also-
remember like cornfields.
Hopstad also has a lot of hills as well.
Maybe listeners can pin these down for us.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
I will ask my mom
That'd be cool.
because if I had to make a guess, I bet she knows because she's from here. So I will ask her, but it's either my guess is it's either by rights or it's probably up near Hopstad.
Okay. All right.
If I had to make a guess,
Be curious. I'd like to know. Let's see. Also, too, there is, and here's a place that's relatively close to us. My uncle has a house that is standing vacant on Baird Park Drive. And it is haunted by an entity called the Gray Ghost. Apparently, my aunt and my sister have awakened or looked up to several times to find a hooded gray figure looming over them. Apparently, it's a pretty malevolent creature. It seems to drain energy from anything and everything, electrical appliances, people.
On-site investigation, Marcus?
sounds like it. I mean, there are a lot of, like grayish, whitish, heavily cloaked entities near rivers, like water sources.
Okay.
It's pretty common.
So
like,
that's like
that's
interesting.
I know that there's a lot of like white lady type stories like around large bodies
Like
of
La
water.
Llorona?
Yeah. Or the there's a couple of them in Ireland that are very similar. So you see that doesn't shock me that they ran into entities like that near people often don't realize how big the Ohio River is,
You know what? And
especially down by us.
I'm embarrassed because I should have mentioned that the Ohio River, obviously, because we're a community on the water, that also I think plays a factor.
Because I know a lot of people are familiar with the Gray Lady, so it's interesting that there are other types of gray cloak type entities that people have ran into here in Evansville.
Yeah, my family members got, despite this, jump scare type issue that kept going on, they got used to it. But they moved out, and so today the Gray Ghost has the house all to itself.
Did you say the phrase awakened? Like you thought that they awakened it? Or they were awakened by it?
No, they would wake up to
Okay,
find it
okay,
standing over them.
By any chance, at some point in the future, do you think there would be a possibility of us getting access to check it out?
Let me check it out. I'm going to have
appreciate
coffee.
you a lot.
I'll have lunch with my cousin next week, and I'll check with her.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
sure.
We would be very happy to do an investigation. into
Yeah,
the
sure.
house.
Yeah, absolutely. Another place that I was just going to say, I have a couple. I don't know how we're doing on time.
Go for it.
Okay. My grandmother used to tell me a story, and boy, oh boy, my grandmother was she was a tough businesswoman, but back in the day, she was pretty tough. My mother tells the story of my grandmother showing up to pay rent to find two gentlemen callers in the house with the two prostitutes and she found out for sure. And so she threw them all out of the house, and one of the gentleman callers broke a beer bottle and started menacing my grandmother with it. And my mother at this point was about 10 or 12, and she's terrified. She runs to my grandfather's butcher shop and says, Daddy, please come help. They're going to kill Mommy. And he just calmly says, oh, she can take care of herself. And my mother goes back, and sure enough, the prostitutes and the Johns are calmly putting furniture out on the sidewalk.
That's a tough lady
She
right
was
there.
tough. So when she told you a story, you believed it.
I can just see them and like, pick up that cabinet, hoe.
She was tough. She really was. So she tells this story. She tells this story when she was at the wheel, and again on the west side in the early 1900s. She had a car full of kids. It was sleeting and raining, and she was driving amidst cornfields, so the visibility was virtually zero. So, even though she knew her way, she got lost, and soon she got pretty scared because she was starting to run low on gas, remembering that she's in one of those, old cars that have, no gas tank, no headlights, nothing to speak of like what we have today. So, clearly she's driving through the cornfields on a road. There's no way in or out, when suddenly up ahead she sees a man that she describes as being outlined in blue. So she couldn't miss him. She steps on the brakes, rolls down the windows, and to her shock, the man was wearing an overcoat and a hat back then, but his hat and his coat were completely dry. Still, especially knowing her, she figures there's a logical explanation. And she asks this man for directions. He gives her easy directions. She drives on, and she realizes, and again, this is way back in the day when you could trust people, late 40s, early 50s. She's thinking, oh my gosh, this man's out in the middle of the cornfield. The next house is back then miles away. I better go back and give him a ride. So she goes back, and the man is nowhere to be found.
Okay. What was the description of the man one more time? Because I think I got a connection here.
Oh, really? Okay.
Maybe. Give me the description one more time, just so I know.
I don't have much. He was wearing a hat and an overcoat. He was outlined in blue.
Okay. This was maybe 5 years before we started the YouTube channel. This is back when, remember when I was living back in those backroaded forested areas out by USI? I kept having this reoccurring dream about a glowing blue person and a man in a fedora. Or sorry, I need to get closer to the mic. A man in a fedora and a kind of a suit coat or a sports coat. And then, like one day when I was driving through the field by the house, out in the field, I saw this just glowing blue humanoid form. But keep in mind, this wasn't so much it was blue outline. This was like a blue Nova walking through a field.
Oh, wow, okay.
But just an odd connection that I was having dreams about a guy in a fedora and a sports coat and a glowing blue person, and it was in Evansville.
Where was
So,
this?
Out around USI, you know where I think it's a
Oh, okay.
Chuckles gas station?
Of course I know. Yeah.
You turn like towards the Chuckles, and there's this wooded area there, and I
Of
was
course,
looking out
my
that
doctor's is right before you go there.
area. Yeah. So it was out in that wooded area back there, and I'd seen the blue glowing guy in the cornfield right at the end of the forest.
Huh.
It reminds me a lot of the stories that people in rural parts of America talk about whenever they would run into like Men in Black type stories. Like John Keel talks a lot about this, where he'd see people would like way out in the middle of nowhere would have these like odd encounters with these people in these like overcoats and these like large wide brim hats.
Yeah.
You know, and there would be something like really weirdly bizarre about them.
Well, I don't think it's an accident that Hollywood puts so many pictures in the Midwest. That
Oh,
they
yeah.
situate so many movies in the Midwest because, it's a simmering cauldron. It really is. But I think it's possible that now that you mention it, that maybe this is sort of a geographically tied entity.
And perhaps, but also like going back to what you're saying about so many things in Indiana, Supernatural came through here all the time. Erie,
really?
Indiana.
Oh my gosh.
Stranger Things is set in Indiana
It was
as
such
well.
a great show.
Like a lot of horror revolves around specifically Indiana and occasionally Evansville.
And I just, although I've never heard anybody really express it, I don't see how the creators of Stranger Things, they had to have seen Erie, Indiana.
Oh, I believe it.
They had to.
I saw
They're
some.
so-
I saw some influence from this, from like the way that
So
they.
direct.
Well, people in the paranormal remember that show, Erie, Indiana, and how awesome that it was, and how it influenced so much. Like, I think me and Vic were probably I was probably preteen, maybe teenager, and I think you were probably a teenager by the time that
Young
came
teen,
out.
I think.
Yeah, okay.
Whenever that show came out.
Okay, yeah, it's amazing. And I think Stranger Things, at one point in Stranger Things, they bring out a map, and they point to where Hawkins is, and they pretty much put it at Bloomington.
Oh, neat. I didn't
And
catch that.
yeah, they point to it. They're like, here's Hawkins, and that's Bloomington. Well, I went to IU Bloomington, and I went from 87 to 91. And, back then, let me tell you, I was a Reagan Republican. Let me tell you, back then I was a Reagan Republican, and I had a Wiccan friend in one of my linguistics classes, and she would tell me, she'd say, "Well, a bunch of vortices converge in Bloomington." And when I was a freshman, I was like, "Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's nice." By the time I was a senior, I was like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, for sure, of course."
Also, fun fact about Bloomington that a lot of people don't know. This is like underground paranormal secrets. My dad, who worked there forever, he said one of the things about Bloomington was that a lot of the people in town believed that this equipment that was behind one of the coals there in Bloomington was a government project to control the weather.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what?
I have told you that.
Well,
No, you-
NWSC Crane.
Yeah, and Crane, yeah.
I
So,
mean, you don't get more secretive than the Crane. I mean,
the naval base that's not far from Evans
Yeah,
that
I-
people don't know about.
yeah, I apologize. There's a lot of
Oh no,
regional.
No, I
that we're
know.
talking about
I
here,
know.
yeah.
Oh, I know.
I know I should laugh about that behind Coles, but at this point, whenever anything about Bloomington, I mean, I'm like, oh, okay, well, it could be true, I believe, it could be true.
Like it's weird from the tip of Evansville of Indiana all the way to Bloomington. You hit Indy and you stop.
Yes!
And it goes back all the way to North Indiana.
And then all of a sudden it picks up again, and that's where I lived. And one of my stories is from northern Indiana.
Neat.
Yeah, I lived I lived 7 miles south of Gary
Gotcha.
in a town named Sherrville, Indiana.
The fact that you survived, I'm gonna give you a round of applause for being that close to Gary.
Oh,
We're talking about murder rate per capita.
well, hey, Evans, we're working on it. We're working on it.
We're from Indiana. We
Competitive.
can say it.
Competitive.
They know.
Well, I lived close to many of the sites you mentioned. La Llorona takes place on Klein Road, which I would go on, or daily at times. And I lived maybe about a mile, an hour and a half away from Oak Ridge Prairie, which is around Reeder Road, which is considered the most haunted road in Indiana, which is probably true.
I'd love to drive that.
I would too.
It's an experience.
I think we got time for one final question each.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. My final question to you is going to be, since you're an author,
Okay.
if there's a person listening on our podcast that wants to get started being a paranormal writer, where would you recommend they start? Like, how should they start? What would your advice be?
Oh, wow. That is a heck of a question. Well, if you really, I know this is probably going to seem like it's going to come out of left field for you. But I would say, honestly, okay, I'm just going to be honest here. I would say to make a prayer list, like 10 items every day, and pray them every day, and start watching things. And you know what? And at this point, I'm not going to tell you who to pray to, but start watching things start unfold around you. Because once you open the door, then things will start unfolding around you. Now, it depends, I mean, if it were if I had to do it all over again, I would have gone to church earlier. Because as I said, you join an evangelism committee, and you're gonna have crap coming out of your butt. You're gonna be a target. So that's I think the best way to learn is by immersion, and also by reading as well. But I'm just gonna be honest with you. I pray to God every day, but I also understand there's a lot of different roads and journeys out there as well. But I think once you open the door and start becoming observant and trust what you see, start asking yourself, what are the odds of X happening? What are the odds of Y happening? And they start dropping pretty quick. What's the Sherlock quote? Sherlock Holmes quote: "When you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth."
Love it. Love it.
I swear back in the day when we used to do quotes, like for the beginning of our videos, you did that one once.
I'm certain I did. I've read Doyle. It's been a while since I've done it. I haven't had the itch to read Doyle in 10 years.
Right. The BBC series is interesting because it takes him into the paranormal.
Okay, here's my question for you.
Yes.
Do you feel like Evansville has a higher volume of strangeness than normal? And if so, why do you think so?
I am completely sure Evansville has a higher volume than normal.
Oh, I'm with you 100%.
Much higher than normal. I mean, I have lived in other places, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I mean, I've all over the place. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of this. And so a lot of this has its manifestations in the good stuff. The amazing restaurants, the thriving cultural scene. And so that's good. And we do have, churches around here that are doing wonderful, wonderful work. But on the other hand, we do see the rising murder rate. And as I said, not just the murder rate, the freaky murder rate, freaky stuff. And, we have the drug running. We have the gun running. We are the center of America's opioid epidemic. And a lot of this does have to do, I'm positive, with, our, the fact that, we're on the water here and we are the crossroads of the crossroads. Evansville is the northernmost city of the South, I believe.
We keep bringing up great restaurants, and I just want to throw one out there.
Oh,
if you
okay.
live here in Evansville and you haven't tried Flourish, go try Flourish.
Flourish?
I absolutely love Flourish.
Ooh, I haven't tried
It's
that.
a vegan restaurant.
But it's like,
Oh, I've heard of it. I'll try and give it a shot.
I'm not even vegan, and I eat there all the time.
Oh my
because
gosh.
the food is that good.
It's good. I will say for vegan food, it is very tasty.
It is
Okay.
just straight good.
And this is not this is not paid promotion.
No.
Seriously at all. We're
we
just
have
shooting
no
the breeze here.
sponsors.
No.
Nobody gives
Shooting
us
the
money.
breeze. Excuse me. Yak and Yeti.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yes. The Himalayan restaurant. I love that
please.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, we do have really solid restaurants here in Evansville.
We really do. For a town this size?
Yes. The only thing that seems to survive in Evansville is the paranormal and restaurants
Food. Yeah.
and food.
Yeah.
All right. So we're.
I was a pastor's wife for many, many years. Sorry.
Oh, no. Oh, wow.
Yes, for 25. My ex-husband used to say that that Indiana was the middle finger of the South. And I'm like, yeah, that's true.
Oh, it's so true.
And on that note,
And on that note, T. Harriman, her book is Burn This Book, The 10,000 Year Plan. You can get it on Amazon.
and All Hail Queen of the Freaks is coming out
Yes.
in March.
Can people pre-order it yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Whenever it can be pre-ordered, we will let people know.
You're a
Whenever-
sweetheart.
We will
I'll let you
absolutely
know.
do that.
Thanks.
But however, you can get her book, Burn This Book, The 10,000 Year Plan, currently on Amazon. Thank you so much for coming onto our podcast.
Hey, guys, thank you so much for having me.
We appreciate that. And patrons, don't stick around because we've got a couple other questions and a little bit more that we're going to be talking about. But until next time, guys, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.
All right, guys, we're going to slide into the Pillow Talk segment of this podcast. If you want to check out the rest of this awesome podcast, all you got to do is go over to our Patreon and sign up. For as little as $1 a month, you get the rest of this awesome podcast, as well as the rest of our podcast, as well as bonus videos that we put up exclusively for our patrons. If you sign up to be $2 more a month, you actually get to vote on the theme of the month for us, where our newest poll is going to be going up. It should be up now, where we added the apocalypse.
Dun, dun, dun.
So there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about within there, so we hope that. So if you guys go sign up, let your voices be heard. We always say that. But we wanted to get a little bit more into talking Miss T. Harriman here about some of
I'm
her
back.
experiences, with the paranormal. You were talking, I know beforehand and during the break, we were talking that you had a lot of personal experiences in Chicago
Yeah.
that go down. Would you say, were they different than, you say, some of your experiences that you had in Evansville? Were they similar? Like what exactly? Would you say?
Different. I have, speaking of what you mentioned, you're doing something on Armageddon. When I was a docent at the Oriental Institute, we would always have people come in. There's a Megiddo section, and I would never expect you to know where Megiddo is,
I
but
know it's a town, isn't it?
precisely, it's an area.
Where?
Excuse me.
It's Northern Illinois, isn't it?
No, Megiddo is a part of the Middle East where the Megiddo is where we get Armageddon from. So it's where Armageddon is supposed to take place. So people would always come there looking for clues. So looking for stuff.
I remember whenever we would work at the psych hospital and people would talk about that the end of the world is coming, I was like, can I just have a heads up so I'm not at work?
I know,
like,
seriously, because I don't want to be here.
And I'm not making fun of it. I'm not